Hello, so today I'm going to talk about some maybe relatively new Chembaron tech. This is at least tech that is becoming a lot more popular now. So if you're a Chembaron enjoyer and you're looking for another way to play Chembaron besides just, trying to go for the max cash out and hit your vertical Chembaron win condition, this is going to be something that might be very important for you to know in your rank up journey. Before we get into it, please make sure to like and subscribe if you like my content. I usually do guides and, comp breakdowns, things like that. But I also do some reaction and VOD review content as well. There's also membership offers if people want to look at members exclusive stuff that's a little bit more for fun, or also try and get some coaching. There's some offers in the memberships for that as well. And then also we have the store, which is just my art store. I'm going to be doing an art convention in May, so I'm going to be doing art and gradually adding it to this store if you ever want to buy any of the prints that I do. Now, let's talk about Chembaron. So there's a couple things to go over with Chembaron. First of all, when you're playing Chembaron, basically the way that it works is that you basically just lose a bunch of fights, and if you lose a bunch of fights, then you get a cash out, and that cash out is usually some amount of items and or Chembaron units. So if you look at this Chembaron core, however, there's some units that are pretty flexible in the way that they fit onto different boards, and that is with 3 Chembaron. So I originally did a full guide on Chembaron. Of course, if you're trying to play Chembaron and go for your max cash out, a lot of the times the cash out that you win with is around 500. So this is going to be a little bit spoiler. If you're somebody who doesn't want to see the cash outs, please skip ahead. But basically, every 100 shimmer, so you earn shimmer every time you lose with Chembarons. If you have more Chembaron units in, you gain more shimmer. But basically, the idea is that every 100 breakpoints, you get a shop, and you get to pick one of these things. These are the odds of the different things appearing in your shop. So breakpoint 1, 2, and 3, they're not relatively strong. But once you get into breakpoint 5, which is 500 shimmer, you're going to see these tier 3 items. These tier 3 items are relative to these Chembaron items. Tier 3 are the perfected, quote-unquote perfected items, and these are all your win conditions. So a lot of times, if you're playing Chembaron and you're trying to just go first and instant win the game, you're aiming for a 500 cash out for that reason, and then whichever tier 3 item you get from any one of these different cash outs that you could receive, you then use that to basically convert to a win. It's very strong. They've nerfed it. It's still strong. They nerfed it again. It's still strong. Trust me, a tier 3 item, sometimes it's not a first place because obviously there's other things other people can hit, but more often than not, you win the game if you have your tier 3 item. So what's the new tech to play around? Well, getting to 500 is pretty risky, and a lot of times you can die trying. It's very hard to get to. So this part is pretty difficult unless you have a really strong, good Chembaron start. However, something that I alluded to in my Chembaron guide, if you want to see more about Chembaron, it's my most popular video, so you can check it out there. But in the Chembaron guide, I talked about how if other things get buffed and if other comps kind of work out, you can often go for a lighter cash out, and you can play around these couple units because they have really good synergies, right? You have a Sentinel in the form of Singed, a Bruiser in the form of Rennie, and then the last unit, either a Dominator or a Visionary, you can often fit in with other boards. So what is the new tech? Well, if you think about these traits, right, Sentinel, Bruiser, and Visionary, there's a comp that uses that pretty easily, and that is Visionaries. So the new tech, it's not really new tech for the main thing. It's just because it's becoming a lot more popular now. A lot of challenger level players are starting to use it, and then there's like a trickle down effect. I'm starting to see it in my Masters/GM games, and I'm sure you guys are going to start seeing it in your games as well. But basically the idea is that you're playing around 6 Visionary, except you're playing around the Chembaron core to give yourself cash outs that can help you to win. Now, why is this strong? Well, let's just rearrange this board so that you can see the units a little bit better. I just split them up by Chembaron and Visionary. But typically, this looks very similar to how you would play around Visionaries otherwise. A lot of times you're playing 4 Sentinel, 4 Visionary, so instead here you're playing 2 Bruiser and 2 Sentinel and 6... a lot of times you're playing 6 Visionary, 4 Sentinel, but here you're playing 6 Visionary, 2 Bruiser, 2 Sentinel. And the idea is that you're swapping out 2 Sentinel units to play Rennie and to play Singed, which you usually already play Singed anyways, and you get the Bruiser synergy because you have the Visionary Bruiser that is Nunu, and then you get the synergy for Visionary and Chembaron with the Renata, which a lot of times you're going to play towards. When you're playing around this comp, we're going to go over items in a second, but a lot of times you're trying to play around main tank Singed or main tanked Rennie. And it actually works really well with Chembaron because of the cash outs that allow you to get multiple copies of these units. This will look very similar to some of my previous content that I did on my channel. So I already made a Chembaron guide, but like even from very recently, when I talked about Morgana Visionary reroll, this is going to be something that looks very similar, as well as my Visionary guide, which was a couple weeks ago. This will also look very similar to talking about Vertical Visionary. because it is just the vertical visionary comp, except now you're just slotting in Chem-Baron. Now, why does that matter? Why is that really strong? Well, a lot of times when you're playing a level 8 comp, you're getting taxed in your mid game by losing rounds. Chem-Baron gives you an efficient way to get extra resources on your opponent in order to cap out this board a little bit higher. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the Chem-Baron table again. Now, when you're playing this isn't you going for 500 cash out and this is the board that you play. We're not talking about taking a 500 cash out and winning the game off of this visionary board. What this is good for is all the cash outs before 500. A lot of these cash outs are very easy to achieve in your mid game because of the way that they buffed Chem-Baron. A lot of times if you're playing around Chem-Baron, even if you don't start with Chem-Baron, you can often tech in Chem-Baron and you can easily get to 100, easily get to 200, easily get to 300, and then 400 is a little bit meh. It's a little bit like hit or miss. Sometimes you hit it, sometimes you don't. But the idea is that not only do you get these items from these early cash outs, but in the early cash outs you get these duplicators, and you're going to see there's a lot of copies of this Rennie unit, and there's a lot of copy of these singed units. So it makes it really easy for you to just get a 3-star frontline a lot of the times. Often what you end up playing towards a board that looks like this. You're going to play 6 Visionary. The 6 Visionary buff is massive because basically with 6 Visionary you get a bunch of casting and then you also heal for 16% of the damage dealt. So your whole board becomes inherently very tanky because of this healing aspect of the Visionary trait. So you basically play around 6 Visionary and you're going for Rennie 3 basically. So often you'll be able to get a 300 cash out. If you look at 300 cash out, the most likely 300 cash out 55% odds is a tier 2 item, a tier 1 item, an egg remover, and a 2-star Rennie. There's also a 15% chance that you get 1 item and you get another 2-star Rennie and a 2-star Sneech. Additionally, if you make it to 400 cash out, there's a small percentage chance you get a Singed 4, but you also can get a 2-star Rennie or a 3-star Renata with a high likelihood. A lot of the times what you're doing is you're going for these cash outs to get your Rennie. Then on level 8, you usually continue to roll on level 8 until you have a Rennie 3. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to get the Chem-Baron cash outs that give you the Rennie and also give you an item that works well with the Rennie. With the Chem-Baron items, you basically would itemize on your Renata, which often you can get the 3-star version if you get the correct cash out. But often you're going to put your AP or damage Chem-Baron items on the Renata, and you're going to put your tank items on the Rennie. And these Chem-Baron tank items, especially if you hit the tier 2 versions, so like there's a tier 1 version, which is the weakest version, right? These are tier 0s, they're like not really items. Then the tier 1 items, these are like effectively an item. The tier 2 items are like stronger items, and then the tier 3 items are the win condition items. But a lot of times you're catching out either tier 1 or tier 2 items. I introduced these in my Chem-Baron guide, so if you want more detail about each item in particular, I'll talk about them in that guide. You can check it out as my most popular video if you haven't seen it already. But typically on Rennie, the ones that are really good are Destabilized Chem Tank, because this is just a generic, like it's just a strong tank item, Piltover Hex Armor, or Shimmer Bloom. And ideally you get the 2 version of it, like the 2 is the upgraded version. Virulent Virus and Unleashed Toxins, you can also technically put on Rennie if you just want the Rennie to cast or do more damage, but a lot of times you'll put these on Renata, and Voltaic Saber you'll also put on Renata often. Executioner's Chainblade is also good, because basically like if you kill, it gives you like damage amp and durability, but a lot of times because of the execute, you can put on a backline unit. The only one that you really don't want to see is Flesh Ripper. Shimmer Bloom is great on Rennie, so a lot of times Destabilize, Piltover, or Shimmer Bloom you want to put on your Rennie as your main tank, or your Singed if you end up hitting a 3-star Singed. This comp works really well if you're also going for Renata reroll, because if you're trying to reroll Renata, sorry, not Renata, if you're going for like, you know, Morgana reroll, which we talked about before, you can play this Chem-Baron variation, because then you'll just itemize towards the Singe with whatever items you get, except that's a little bit more difficult, because if you're rerolling, you're often strong in your mid game, so it's not something you usually win out with. When you're looking at your items, you're building towards the Heimerdinger as your main carry. So what's really important is to have a blue buff. Blue buff is very important. It's your number 1 priority. It takes 2 tiers, so a lot of times on carousel, the first thing that you're going to try and grab is a tier almost always. You should have good carousel prio because you're going to be playing Chem-Baron, so you're going to lose a lot of the time in your early games. So you get your blue buff. Then the other items, you can either go for full damage, so that would be like Jewel Gauntlet, Guard Breaker. But a lot of times, with these Visionary comps, it's really nice to have Hextech Gunblade to just make it so that you heal as much as possible. And also even an Archangels can work really well on this Heimerdinger because your Rennie is basically going to be unkillable. Between the Rennie being 3-star, having a Chembaron item, which are generally very strong tank items, and having 6 Visionary in, you'll be extremely strong. As soon as you have a Malzahar, you're almost always putting items on Malzahar, by the way, so you almost always want to be itemizing this Malzahar unit. He's broken, and he's also going to get buffed in the next patch. So a lot of times it's Shojin, and then whatever damage items you can manage to put on him, you put on him, you give him as much damage as possible. Visionary scales based on the amount of cast that they do, because they do a bunch of, basically, like, the way that Visionary works, it causes your units to cast a bunch more because you're gaining more mana. Heimer scales with as many casts as he does. All the units damage scales with as many casts as you do, so you want to give them either crit chance on that, base AP on that, or damage amp on that. Those are the 3 things that you want, either through augments, through items. Try and balance between the 3 of them. So for example, if you're building a bunch of AP on Heimer, try and give him damage amp through your augments or your items, or your anomaly. If you're building a bunch of, like, you know, crit chance on him, you know, build towards base AP, etc. Right? You can alternate. There's many different builds. The items are extremely flexible because the main thing that you need is blue buff. Now, I think the items that I would personally build that I like the most is I always just like full crit with damage amp. I'm a big fan of Guardbreaker Jewel Gauntlet. If you've ever watched any of my videos, I always recommend these type of items because if you can make them, it kind of gives you a bit of everything. This Guardbreaker item has been way too strong for way too long. I think it's like one of the most broken items in the game. It always is good to make. It feels like, especially for these AP comps, it gives you damage amp, it gives you crit chance, it gives you attack speed. It gives you HP sometimes, which is important if you're trying to survive getting sniped from the back line. I don't know. I think it's just a great item, and its condition for applying the damage amp is pretty easy. And then it pairs really well with the Jewel Gauntlet. Just makes your abilities crit, and then gives you a huge amount of crit chance. So typically when you're playing Visionaries, a lot of times you want a Visionary emblem. What's really great about this line is you don't necessarily need a Visionary emblem to cap out the board really high. A lot of times, like, let's say you're not playing around Rennie 3, a lot of times you're playing a board that looks like this, and then it becomes very difficult for you to fit in both 6 Visionary as well as 4 Sentinel, because as you can see, this is a board that you require to be on level 9 to play 4 Sentinel and 6 Visionary in the same comp. So it's a little bit awkward unless you have a Visionary emblem. So a lot of times if you need a Visionary emblem, that allows you to fit this board on level 8, which is a lot more reliable. It also allows you to more easily play around Black Rose if you're not playing around the Sentinels. However, a Visionary emblem is also really important, even though you don't require it when you're playing around the Chem-Baron variation like this. It does allow you on level 9 with the Visionary emblem to then play around 4 Sentinel anyways, right? So as you can see, your highest cap a lot of times is Visionary emblem on Rumble. It works really well because when his ult misses, he gains extra mana. So, or sorry, when he does his cast and he fires the missiles, he gets a mana refund, and that gets scaled up by the 6 Visionary, so it works really well. In a lot of these cases, if you don't have Morgana 3, or even if you do have Morgana 3, you can drop Morgana, and you can basically play 6 Visionary, 4 Sentinel. This is a max cap version where you play the Chem-Baron variation, you have 3-star Rennie, but then you just play deeper into Sentinel, and you can still fit in your 6 Visionary with a Visionary emblem. So even though you don't require it, you should always take Visionary emblem if you're trying to reach that max cap and try and cap out the board really high, because if you can make it to level 9, you'll be extremely strong. A lot of times though, you're going to be rolling really deep on level 8, so your board's going to look something like this. You're rolling deep on level 8 because you really want to have the Rennie 3-star. You could technically go for Rennie, like Rennie 2-star and push levels and try and like cap out around Malzahar 2 and something else. That only really works if you can make it with a Visionary emblem, in my opinion, to get the 4 Sentinel in. Because the thing that makes Heimer and this Visionary line work really well is having a core unit that doesn't die, that you can continually heal. Because once all of your units die, the Visionary trait where it chooses an ally to heal for the damage dealt, it will always heal that main tank. So that main tank will become this unkillable monster, and as you have Heimerdinger that scales with the amount of cast, the later the fight goes on, the more damage the Heimer will do. So you're basically like increasing the amount of healing you're doing over time, increasing the amount of damage you're doing over the time, and you really just need like a Giga Tank. And this comp, the way of building this Chem-Baron, it allows you to make a Giga Tank. Another unit that's like really hard to deal with in almost every board that you see her as Alawi. I'm sure you guys have seen it. Alawi's ability is just incredible. She just heals forever. She has so much armor. She does good damage. She gains durability. She's just like a really hard unit to deal with. So if you don't have the Rennie, that's why a lot of times you're relying on hitting, a 2-star Alawi to kind of build into the same idea. But like I said before, the main way to cap out this comp is always Heimerdinger and Malzahar. You could play this variation when you're playing around Renata 3-star, Morgana 3-star reroll, but I would not recommend it because you want to, 2-star Heimer. You want to hit the Malzahar, and a lot of times you want to roll on level 8 just to fit in the 6 Visionary and be a little bit more efficient. So a lot of times if you're sacking a bunch of rounds, it doesn't really synergize to play this with the reroll because then you're going to burn all your gold on rolling for the units, and then you might not hit the high Chem-Baron cash out because you're going to be stronger in your mid game. And if you wait too long in your mid game because you're trying to stall out for Chem-Baron, you lose too much HP and then the Morgana falls off late game. So a lot of times you can just pick it up on the way there. Things that work really well with this is something like Shop Glitch, for example, I think it's called, where at the end of a stage you roll, because then you can go for 3 stars of your lesser units while still being able to push levels to try and hit your Heimerdinger and your Malzahar. So this is a new Chem-Baron tech. I don't have a video to show you guys because I didn't get offered a video today, but if you want to see this tech in action, what I would recommend actually is going on the actual main TFT. So TFT regionals happened this weekend, and this was something that was played a lot in TFT regionals. So you can actually check it out because I think Weijin played it a bunch. I'm not sure if other people played it, but it was really popular at regionals throughout the day. So I'm sure if you watched it or if you see it, that's where I kind of got it and I decided, hey, I should make a video on this because I kind of knew about this beforehand. It's something that I tried out before. It's something that I tried out very early on in the set, actually, like once at the beginning of the set. Not into Visionary in particular, but around like Black Rose Visionary when that was a thing. But this is still something you should keep in tabs on. Make sure that you try it out in your games, and it's really strong. And the benefit of it is that you don't need to get deep Chem-Baron cash outs. So if we go back to the Chem-Baron cash outs and we look at these, if you look at your 100 cash outs, you get these lesser duplicators. So a lot of times you can play it and just use the duplicator if you already have a lot of copies of Rennie. So this is only if you put in Chem-Baron really late in the game. But a lot of times, even a 200 cash out, you get multiple copies of Rennie. But this is the sweet spot, like 300 to 400, what you're usually aiming for. You don't lose too much HP going for 300 or 400. And a lot of times it's not as risky as getting to 500. So often you can just put in Chem-Baron in your mid game and you could pretty easily get to 300. Sometimes if you're lucky, you get to 400 if you have a lot of Chem-Baron units. But if you look at it, you get your tier 2 item, which ideally these tier 1 and tier 2 items are both tank items you could put on Rennie. In the worst case, you can put on a backline unit, and hopefully you have a Reforger that if you get like a Flesh Ripper or something that's really unusable, you can fix it for something else. It also gives you the 2-star Rennie, so you don't even have to roll for the Rennie, you just have it. And if you already have a couple Rennies, which you probably do if you're playing Chem-Baron, it puts you really close to hitting that Rennie 3-star, which is just an unkillable frontline demon. So Breakpoint 3, 300 Shimmer is really great. If you look at this one's pretty good. This one with the Silco isn't as great, but then there's a second cash out here that gives you a 2-star Rennie. So between these two, if you add up the numbers, this is a 70% chance that you're just going to get a 2-star Rennie off of your cash out, which is great to stabilize around. Additionally, this one gives you a 2-star Renata. And if you look at the 400 cash out, you have a 40% chance of 3 items, so you have a really good chance of hitting good Rennie items here. So this one's really great for a cash out. The 20% is also a really great cash out. You just don't get the magnetic remover, which is just weird to me why these two things are different, but whatever. But then also you have a 30% chance of hitting the Rennie. You have a 1% chance of just like insta winning and hitting like a 4-star Singed, which you can use as your main tank. And you also have a 9% chance of just hitting a Renata 3-star. So all of these 400 and 300 cash outs, you just aim for the more consistent one. You do your roll down, you play around your Visionaries. Obviously, if you don't have a Malzahar, you just play the other Visionary unit, which is, I forget who. What's her name? This dude, Vex. Right? You can play Vex and play some Malzahar until you hit it. But like I said, really high cap, really strong to play, and you should definitely give it a whirl if you have the opportunity to. So that's just the video I wanted to talk about today. Thanks for watching, and see ya. Bye-bye.